just about 7 o'clock. Everyone's doing a great job of joining and keeping their cameras off and microphones muted, which is awesome. If we can just remember to keep that going through the presentation, that will keep the presentation optimized for Peter. I do also want to remind everybody that there's a chat box at the bottom of your screen, somewhere around here. I don't know if you can see it. You can type into the chat box any questions or concerns or comments that you have. I'll type a message into it here. Let me see it. Message to everyone. Hi, everyone. This is the chat box. You can type into the chat box any questions, and as the moderator today, once the presentation is over, I can go through the questions with Peter so that we can answer them and make sure that everybody's questions get answered appropriately. The presentation is also going to be recorded. So if you wanted to watch it again or share the presentation with a friend, we'll be posting the link probably on the Lyme Land Trust site and probably the Lyme Pollinator Pathway Facebook page and other places as well. I do also want to thank our co-sponsors this evening. This program is brought to you tonight by Lyme Pollinator Pathway, the Lyme Land Trust, and also the Lyme Public Library. So thank you to those three groups for making this event happen tonight. If you wanted to learn more about the Pollinator Pathway group in Lyme, you can follow us on Instagram or on Facebook. We also have a web page on the Lyme Land Trust website. It's lymelandtrust.org/Lyme-pollinator-pathway. It's on this handout here that I have that I'm sharing my screen here on the bottom. You can see Lyme Land Trust. I don't know if you can see the arrow. lymelandtrust.org, Lyme Pollinator Pathway. That's our web page. But we also have a Facebook page that has the same information, and you can learn more about Pollinator Pathways Northeast by going to pollinator-pathway.org. Also, if you are joining us from a town other than Lyme and you want to start your own pollinator pathway, we got started by messaging the Pollinator Pathway Northeast group, and they sent us a packet on how to get started, and we were able to launch our own group in that way. So this is the organization that can help you do that. I don't want to eat into too much of Peter's time. I'm just going to jump right in and introduce him. Embarrassingly, I just met him this evening, but I'm going to pretend like we're old pals. Actually, he does work at Sessions Woods, which is right near where I grew up, and I spent a lot of time stomping around in those woods, probably when he was first getting started with working up there when I was just a little kid. He's been up there now for over 30 years at Sessions Woods. He's a CT Deep wildlife biologist. And tonight he's going to talk to us about conserving Connecticut's biological diversity. And he's going to talk about planting natives and managing invasives. So without further ado, everybody, I would like to welcome Mr. Peter Picone.
Thank you, Sue. I'm really happy to be here tonight and sharing whatever I can, tidbits of my knowledge and information about wildlife habitat, how we can make a difference. One thing I've recognized over the years is that we all can make a difference, one plant at a time. And I want to thank the Lyme Land Trust for all the properties you guys are conserving and managing. Got the opportunity to walk one of them a few weeks ago, and it was just a beautiful place. And you have a really beautiful town there. I'm going to share my screen here and get my talk going. Title of my talk is "To Plant or Not to Plant." And as we know, the old that old adage to be or not to be, well, to plant or not to plant. And I kind of played off of that. One of the things that's really fascinating about the world of wildlife habitat improvement enhancement is that we all can make a difference at a small scale or a large scale. And I hope that through my slides, I can impress upon you that that we all can make a difference collectively. I'm going to start my talk with a positive note. I guess the longer every decade that passes, we reflect back. And if I reflect back to my youth, I remember I never saw a bald eagle in Connecticut. You know, you saw some wintering ones here, but just imagine that when I started working for Deep in 1990, there were no nesting pairs. And today there are over 70 nesting pairs that make Connecticut their home. So bald eagles are back in a big way. And I want to point out that it's because people galvanize their thoughts and minds that we're going to see this bird back. We're going to help it. And we remove the DDT from the environment. The biomagnification in the fish wasn't happening anymore. And the young, the eggs wouldn't crack in these birds, as well as a lot of all the other raptors came back. And so we're really fortunate to be alive at a time when bald eagles are just thriving here in Connecticut. You get to see them when you're out canoeing, hiking, fishing, whatever you're doing out there. The same story is happening with habitat, although habitat's a little more complicated. When I started my work, wildlife biologists, we love to talk about and deal with charismatic megafauna. Charismatic, you know, bald eagle's charismatic. It's a beautiful wildlife species. And then, you know, bobcats and bears and, you know, all the wildlife that, you know, are fascinating, you know, seem to be fascinating. But habitat is the foundation of their existence. And from the tallest tree you could find in Connecticut to the smallest, you know, lichen, those all are components of the habitats of Connecticut. So my talk tonight is going to revolve around a subject that is not charismatic megafauna, it's charismatic flora. And believe it or not, flora can be charismatic in it if you anthropomorphize, add animal traits to plants, but you don't want to do that. But if you think about it, and especially this fall, I mean, we're right now at the tail end of a beautiful fall foliage, and it's still continuing. There's no such thing as a bad foliage year. People think it is, but there isn't. Here's my favorite. I'll show you my favorite foliage slide in a second. But what is going to affect wildlife in Connecticut? So the point I wanted to make here was, if people galvanize their thoughts and minds around habitat, just like they did for the bald eagle, they could make a difference and change the trajectory of habitat from going invasive to native, more natives, to conserving habitats and creating beautiful habitats for wildlife and healthy and vibrant ones. And that's up to us as people. 70% of the land in Connecticut is privately owned. So two things are going to destroy or decline or cause declines in biological diversity: habitat loss and fragmentation. And the second greatest threat is invasive non-native species, both plants and animals, and insects and diseases. What is the future of our landscape? It's going to depend on what we do as humans. This is one of my favorite slides, and I took this at Crescent Lake in Southington. Accidentally came out beautiful because it was the angle of the sun and the reflecting light just made it beautiful. I'm not a great photographer. This one turned out awesome, and I live to see these types of scenery, beauty of the landscape. We are so lucky here in Connecticut. I was born and raised in Connecticut, so I'm very fortunate to be able to work here and know this place my whole life. And this is one of the beautiful aspects of our landscape here in Connecticut, living here. This landscape is not here by accident. It's taken many, many millennia to create this beautiful biological diverse landscape. And we as humans are the caretakers of it. So whenever I look at wildlife habitat and I want to manage it or improve it, I have to know what the ingredients that we have. You know, whenever you're going to bake a cake, you got to know what ingredients you got to put in that cake, right? If you want to build anything, you have to have your tools and your ingredients to build it. Well, here in Connecticut, I'm just going to share with you, what are the ingredients? Well, I'm rounding down, but there's about 2,800 different types of plants in Connecticut. And 1,800 of them were native, and I'm rounding down just so you have that in your mind. So you can think about how much percentage we have. The 1,800 native plants are the backbone to habitat. Wildlife and plants are inextricably linked, and they need to have these native plants. They co-evolve. They've pre-colonial settlement, pre-Plymouth Rock settlement, all during the before Europeans settled our area here. 1,800 plants were the backbone of the native landscape. We, as our relatives and our friends and our businesses, and during and after European settlement, we brought in another 1,000 plants. Those 1,000 plants weren't here historically. We were brought over by from off other continents, so they wouldn't have got here unless people moved them here. It's reality. So that makes up 2,800 plants, right? 1,000 plus 1,800. Dr. Meerhoff at UConn, he was in the herbarium. These are figures that I got from him. But there's also a checklist that I'll share with you later that you can do your own research on it. 97 of the 1,000 plants that were brought in are now considered invasive. And we'll share with you a few examples of how to manage those bad plants. But they were brought in and they didn't just sit in your yard or in the ground. They dispersed either by animals or by wind or natural dispersal, and they became invasive. They had a propensity to reproduce, and they explode in numbers, and they displaced some of the 1,800 native plants. Some people say, well, why does that happen? It's because they didn't co-evolve. These non-natives grew and evolved in another continent. Now they're brought into a new place, and there's less predation on the plant. There's more competition, and our native plants end up losing their place in the habitat. So it's important to know these are the tools. The tools. The 1,800 plants are the tools you're going to need. The 97 are your enemy plants, the ones that you want to reduce their influence. And so this beautiful landscape is going to depend on those 1,800 plants. If a sugar maple gets crushed by ice and storms and falls over and wind, and then underneath it is a Norway maple, the Norway maple is not going to provide the same red color, orange, red colors that the sugar maple. And that happens in our forest all the time if there's a lot of invasives in the understory ready to take over. This is a place you can go, checklist. There's a checklist by the Connecticut Botanical Society that you can, I encourage you, if you're really serious about managing and making habitats, this is a good checklist. And then always have this invasive plant list. You can download it off the web. It's 97 plants that are listed as invasive in Connecticut. There's a criteria that listed them. And these are the bad actors. So always, whenever you're planting anything in Connecticut or making a habitat or whatever you are, garden, make sure you try to not use any of the 97 invasive plants that are on this list. We have to know our history to move forward. And imagine Connecticut by 1810 was denuded, and the forests were declared. There were only about 12 deer left in the state. 1813 was the last known living turkey in Connecticut. Eventually, we had about 1,200 dairy farms that were part of our landscape. And you could say, it was a farming community, but we actually have more wildlife around today than we did 200 years ago. Wildlife really disappeared at alarming rates back in those days, and really, if you were a wildlife enthusiast, you really weren't going to have a lot of fun watching a lot of wildlife because it disappeared from here all the way to Maine, all the way to Mississippi River, and the clearing happened right down to Florida. A lot of clearing of land. Well, then you say, well, where did all these forests come from? Well, we're lucky that the forest grew back. We know a lot about the quantity, but we're trying to address the quality. Why did this forest grow back? The Industrial Revolution. It's when farms moved west through the Erie Canal, the shipping of goods and going out west, the bigger farms moving west, and the Industrial Revolution, cities were booming and people left the land in this rocky soil of Connecticut, and the forest grew back on it. It's pretty impressive to go from a 90% pre-Columbus forest cover to then a low of 25%. And today we're at about 58, 57%. And what's really neat about this last 200 years is that we've seen a drastic improvement in forest cover. So we've actually enjoyed living in a state with really densely wooded environment with this 3 million people plus 3.5 million people living in a very wooded environment, and it's really a special place. It's very unique in that we can see a beautiful landscape here in Connecticut, especially during the fall season when it turns beautifully, when it changes color. Well, this is reality in Connecticut. Dirt roads will become paved roads. This is a before and after aerial photo. Farm fields will become subdivisions. Forests will get smaller and subdivided. It's reality. 70% of the land in Connecticut is privately owned, and whatever the landowners want to do with that land, with the planning and zoning rules and the wetland rules and the local, manage control of land use, will dictate what will happen to the land. Now, I want to point out that we can make a difference in both of these scenes, in this before and after. It's just a matter of scale and what we can do. And tonight's talk is going to be what you can do on both of those levels. And I'm going to try to give you examples that in big scale, more rural environments, and then I'll give you examples on smaller scale and more suburban and urban environment. And I want to impress upon you that although the land changes, there are things we can do to improve or enhance property, and it's a matter of scale. And what you can, I'll try to impress upon you, things that you can do to create a better environment. So Connecticut went through a deforestation stage, a reforestation stage, right, during the Industrial Revolution. And now we're in the stage of fragmentation and deforestation. In the old days, if 200 acres were developed, we'd get a farm abandonment, and then that would grow into a forest. And we'd always kind of stay at the same forest cover level. Today, when the forests are removed, we don't get them back from abandoning farm. It doesn't happen as much here in Connecticut anymore. So it's important to recognize that these changes are happening, and then what can we do? And that's where people like yourselves and the pollinator pathway folks and anybody, land trust folks and individuals can make a difference by what they plant on a small scale or a large scale, depending on what's plant and what space is available to them. So animals need 4 things to survive. Okay, they're very basic. They need food, they need water, shelter, cover, and space. We need the same thing as humans. The only difference is we procure our own food, water, shelter, and space. Animals depend on what we leave on the land, what we've determined to be important or not important, and how we change the landscape. The arrangement of these four elements creates the animal's environment. You could be as basic as a monarch butterfly habitat where you create a patch of beautiful milkweed, the three different types that are here in Connecticut. You could have monarchs laying eggs, completing their whole life cycle, and then moving on and going south, flying off back to Mexico in a very small patch. Or you can have a 30-acre forest is where a wood thrush would nest and raise its young. And that's stuff like the land trust is protecting patches that big, and the state DEP as well. So it depends on scale, but you can make a difference any animal that you pick, depending on the scale. And the plants are what create this, the arrangement of plants in the environment, along with the water, creates their habitat. Thickets, cover, it's very important. This is a lot of people will plant something and put mulch around it and they expect, have a tree grow or shrub. We, in wildlife, we like to have thickets where you have dense vegetation. Why? Because animals need it for protection. They are, the animal cannot survive without cover. And here, here's a blue jay sitting in the middle of this slide here, in the middle of this thicket, and it's going to be protected from sharp-shinned hawks and owls, or not owls, sharp-shinned hawks and Cooper's hawks. It doesn't want to sit there just because it likes being in a thicket. It's protecting itself and it's digesting its food. So it's very important to have thickets. Now here is another example of cover. This is an evergreen, and it's got a little lunch pail in the middle of it. And here, if I took the needles off of this plant, you could see my lunch pail. Now it's visible to a potential predator. If the snow was coming down hard, this slide here would be protected from it, right? Well, here it's not. So just imagine that evergreen cover is also a form of cover. This mourning dove seeks out evergreens early in the spring. Why? Because it's an early nester. These birds have a crop milk that they give their young, and they could actually feed their young a crop milk. They feed on seeds, and then now what they do is the early nests are in the evergreens. Evergreens make up about 10% of our landscape. So you'll hear starting in February, you start hearing them cooing. You say, well, what are they doing cooing in the middle of, it's still winter here, late winter? Well, they start mating early because they can feed that crop milk to their young. They don't have to wait for bugs and insects. One day I was walking the trail here at Southington, the Rails to Trails, and I found the nest. It was March 24th. Already had eggs and incubating this mourning dove. And they really like to seek out evergreens. So anywhere in your neighborhood, starting in February, start watching them building their nests and seeking the shelter of the evergreens to build their nests. Here's a little dwarf white pine that they nest in at Sessions Woods occasionally. Evergreens also shelter the snow, and animals can find shelter there. And they can find insect casings and seeds and things, as on the ground in a winter, if it's a cold, very icy winter. Now, landscaping is an art and a science. And I want to point out to you that if you have low plant diversity, you have low wildlife diversity. And if you want to, look at landscapes, this is really neat art, right? People are shaping this and making it look the way they want to look. And then they trim the grass. Now imagine if we replaced that over the 3 million acres of Connecticut, you could see that we wouldn't have a lot of plant diversity. So if you have low plant diversity, you have low wildlife diversity. And let's say you took these evergreens and you put them in a row and you use them to protect your, as a landscape hedge, and they're all hemlocks. Let's say you put a hedge of hemlocks. What if a bug like the woolly adelgid started attacking your hedge? Well, that happened in Connecticut, and we started losing our hemlocks. This hemlock is the woolly adelgid. What if you had a hedgerow of 5 or 6 different evergreens instead of one type of evergreen? Well, you would only lose a fifth or a fourth of the hedge. So keep that in mind. When you plant diversity, you also can reduce diseases and maintenance of those habitats because they're more resilient with many types. And then I just want to point out that as the fall hits us here, December, January, February, a lot of people ask, well, where are the cardinals sleeping at night? Where are the blue jays? Where are the juncos? And a lot of these guys are in the evergreens at night. They seek the evergreens for their shelter and their shelter and the wind resistance. There's some thermal insulation there. Just keep that in mind whenever you're making a landscape that you want to include evergreens. This little owl, small owl found in Connecticut, was roosting right here in this little red cedar and would hunt at night and hang the mice on the branches, and then it would eat the mice during the day. But that was its little habitat. This plant is a stone's throw from Route 15 in North Haven, not very far, but it's its wintering habitat. We took action and actually started removing the competition, like these hardwoods around it, so that we could enhance the evergreen component. So that was a project we did down there, and it thickens the evergreens. So anytime you could add evergreens to the environment and improve evergreens, you are adding to diversity and winter habitat and spring nesting habitat. How much space do animals need? Well, turkeys, the bird here in Connecticut, only needs 4 square miles. But when I say only, that's quite a bit of area, but it'll use that area during the spring, summer, fall, and winter. So they will be utilizing those areas. And your yards, your neighborhood, your open space, all the lands around your town are some in a piece of that habitat that these animals that don't migrate are using. If you're lucky enough to have farmland with 5 or more acres of grassland, you might have the bobolink in your neighborhood. These guys need 5 or more acres of continuous grassland habitat. Meadowlarks need 10 or more acres of grassland habitat. But most of us in our towns have smaller fields, and they're still very diverse. If you have 2, 4, 5, 6 acre meadows, 1 acre meadows, you can make an incredible difference for some of the local more common birds and insect life, butterfly, bumblebees, beneficial insects, hummingbirds. Indigo bunting has become one of my favorite birds. They love to come into these fields, eat the seeds, and nest in smaller fields. And you'll see hummingbirds coming in and out. You'll see, and I'll give you examples of that for you. But the smaller fields and meadows are also very important. Habitat has structure, and it's the place that provides the animals' basic requirements. It has structure. It's got a ground layer, a shrub layer, a mid-story, and upper canopy. I'm sharing that with you because you need to realize that habitat has layers, vertical, and it also has horizontal layering. So when a field meets an edge, the more abrupt it is, the less valuable. The softer it is much more valuable. So keep that in mind. Soft edges are much more valuable. And stratified, ground, shrub, mid, and upper canopy. So the softer edges are much more valuable. Now, this is a real busy slide. Just keep your focus on that. The average number of animals that can live in an area from season to season is it's from the habitat, quality and quantity. The only way you can increase the number of animals that live in an area from season to season is if you improve the habitat. I'll give you an example. If I had a 5-gallon pail, I could only put 5 gallons in it. If you have a yard or a field that has very little milkweed in it, you're going to have very little milk. You're going to have very little monarch caterpillars there laying eggs, butterflies laying eggs and raising young, and their caterpillars growing into chrysalises and then into adults. But if you put milkweed in that field, you're going to increase the average number of monarchs that can live in that area. That's a very microcosm, small example. So the quality and the quantity of habitat is dependent on us, we as humans, what we do to that land. It's our choice because 70% of the land is privately owned. But the way you can improve the average number of animals is by improving the quality and quantity of habitat. And it happens one plant at a time. If you took a bittersweet vine and replaced it with a native honeysuckle vine, trumpet honeysuckle, you'll have hummingbirds feeding on them. You take a patch of turf and you remove it and you plant milkweed, you'll have potentially monarchs laying their eggs on it. You have bumblebees and other pollinators feeding on the nectar of the flowers. Every square inch of ground that you change from an invasive, non-native to a native plant, every square inch, you can make a difference for wildlife. It's really that simple. And the magic to wildlife management, wildlife enhancement, is replacing the bad plants with the good plants and diversifying the land and looking at food, water, shelter, cover, and space. So you always want to ask yourself, what is the limiting factor? Now, for monarchs, it's milkweed, right? The limiting factor is milkweed. So it could be food, seasonal food, it could be nectar, larval food. Every animal has its, and I'm going to share with you examples as we go along. The cover could be a limiting factor. You could have all the food availability that you have, but there's not cover, so the animal is vulnerable. So you need to have both. You have to have cover for the mourning dove. It needs that nesting cover early in the spring. Or if you have all deciduous trees, it's not going to be able to nest because it'll be vulnerable to predation. So every animal has its limiting factor. It could be a seasonal thing, or it could be annual needs. And then the patch size too. In the case of the bobolink, it needs 5 acres of grassland. So there are some patch size, but just keep in mind that when you create a habitat, no matter what that patch size is, you can make a difference in the quality of that patch. And you may be attracting hummingbirds and butterflies and pollinators and beneficial insects, or you may be attracting the indigo bunting, you may be attracting bluebird, you may be attracting box turtle, whatever the patch size and where it is, the arrangement of food, water, shelter, cover, and space. And then, of course, the limiting factor could be an invasive. For a bluebird, it could be a sparrow, an unfortunate house sparrow that was introduced to compete with it and knock it out of its nest. Or it could be black swallowwort that takes over a field and there's no more milkweed there, and the monarchs end up laying eggs on the swallowwort. Invasives can take over areas. So these are some of the limiting factors to consider. Now, native plants restore the habitat, they restore. So the 1800, keep in mind, the 1800, they all can be plugged into the landscape, whether it's a dry mountaintop, whether it's a wetland, whether it's a rocky slope, whether it's a deeply rich soil, whether it's a sandy soil. You have a variety, whether it's a sunny spot, a shaded spot, seasonally wet, seasonally dry. You can create habitat using native plants. Why? Native plants are indigenous. They were co-evolved with our wildlife. They've adapted to that soil and the climate. They co-evolved with our wildlife. There's a relationship, coevolution that took over the millennia. And they promote the natural habitats. You know, there are plant communities. There are plants that go together. And when I did the walk there at Lyme, at your Lyme Land Trust property, we looked at an old field. And in that old field, there were associated plants. There were gray birches with the serviceberry, along with the low bush blueberry, with the red cedar. Those were all pioneers. They are come into old fields, along with the little blue stem in the understory. So there's the closer you mimic these types of habitats, the more diverse you make them, the better you're going to have a chance at making a good quality habitat. I'm going to share examples at Sessions Woods. Like I say, I'm very fortunate to have worked as a wildlife biologist here in Connecticut for all of my career. You know, it's over 30 years now. And I wrote a 10-year management plan for Sessions Woods. It's a wildlife management area. We're located in Burlington, Connecticut. I encourage you to visit. It's between Route 6 and Route 4. It's on Route 69. It's called Milford Street. And it's Burlington Avenue that turns into Milford Street. It's 764 acres. And this property, we practice lots of wildlife habitat enhancement. And, you know, if you visit, there's lots of trails you can walk. Some are very wide and gravel, and some are wooded, you know, more of the woods. We have a Tungus Trail along the property as well. There's 21 forest stands. A forest stand is a similar vegetative community. And it's very diverse property, very nice. And we're managing it in a way to increase biological diversity. Here's a photo I took two days ago. You know, there's some striking beauty there. There's beauty in every piece of property. This one, this photo, this scenery really struck me the other day when I took this photo. We have a beautiful also beaver marsh that's really beautiful this time of the year. And you can really see some neat, there's little nooks and crannies in there that you can, when you're walking, you can really enjoy the land. So we want to maintain a biologically diverse property using scientifically guided habitat principles. It's a mouthful of words, but at the bottom, the end of the day, biological diversity depends on habitat. And if we manage it and improve it, we will make a better habitat. We want to educate the public at this property as well. So if you come there, the building has a conservation education building, which we have exhibits, but then the field, when you walk, you also learn from the field exhibits. And then we also provide people opportunities to recreate, to walk and bird watch and, you know, enjoy the property. This is what it looked like in 1992, May of 1992, when we moved into this building. And I just wanted you to know that the Pittman-Robertson Act, right here, this little symbol, it's federal aid dollars that paid for 75% of this property, buying it, the original 450 acres, and then building the building and a lot of the staff. We get, it's called federal aid, Pittman-Robertson Act money. It's excise taxes from the sportsman equipment and ammunitions and things that sportsmen buy. Now, the solution to wildlife, some people think, let's throw some food in the box. I call it instant results. Well, we could do that. And birds come in, they feed, squirrels try to steal some of the seeds. I instead rather would plant. I like to plant my sunflowers. I'll tell you, I challenge you to buy woodland sunflower. It clones, it's a perennial, unbelievable pollinator plant. I challenge you to plant them, and they make a big, they'll make a nice thicket patch. And when you get it nice and thick, the deer have a hard time getting in the middle of it. It produces these beautiful flowers, and the seeds, you got to beat the birds away. And I'll tell you, I try collecting these seeds every year. You literally, you will witness birds fighting for these seeds. So think about planting instead of just putting food in the box. Food in the box is kind of like eating a Snickers bar and being happy. Wildlife need sustainable habitat like the woodland sunflower patch. So let me share with you some examples here. We don't have this barren soil anymore. We have a beautiful rain garden that collects 5,000 gallons of water off the roof on one side. And then we have 5,000 gallons off the other side. And that goes into a bioswale, but it's amazing. But the plantings, we've tried to diversify the plantings. So I'm going to share with you some of the plantings. I don't know if I have to share with you my little icons hiding behind this. Okay, one day I was going into the fur bear biologist's office to report a bear that I saw, and outside the window, there's a pokeweed plant, and here's a catbird coming up, and it's pecking away and trying to fatten up. It was in the fall, and it's trying to fatten up for the migration. And a lot of people say, oh, you know, catbirds are kind of drab looking. They're not really vibrant, not like a scarlet tanager. But these catbirds are phenomenal. What do they do? They are fattening up for their migration south. And I challenge you to see the life of research the life of a catbird. Here we are up in Connecticut. They come up here to nest. Then they migrate all the way down into these blue areas to winter. They don't jump on a plane or get on a train. They have to feed their way up and down. So what we leave on the land is very important. Pokeweed is one of them, one of the food items that they feed on. And so consider leaving an abundance of, you know, at least a patch of it. But fall migration foods are very important. The other things that wildlife depend on, you know, I'm typing away on my computer one cold January day, and here's a robin, our state bird, chipping away at the ice to get to the winterberry. And it's a treat to see this, but it also makes me ponder how challenging it is for wildlife. Wildlife depend on the resources that are out there. Sometimes it's so cold, they have to chip their way through the ice to get their food. We as humans can go to the frozen food section of the store, buy it, come back home, thaw it out and eat it, cook it. But wildlife really depend on what's on the land. And it's a challenge for wildlife. The same window, the same spot from my office, one fall, I watched a bluebird gobble down the same thing, the winterberry berries. And different time of the year, but also providing a fall sustenance for a bluebird. And then one winter in the front of the, this is another view from the outside, not from my office window. Robins, and if you look over here, there are cedar waxwings enjoyed a feast during a late fall day. I was out in the field one day and I came back in to the treat of these flock of robins came in and ate the red chokeberries. This is outside of our conservation education building. We have a little viewing spot there, and these robins ate every last red chokeberry that was out around the building. You can't put food in a box for these birds. You need to have it on the landscape. And the turkeys will eat it as well. We have patches on the grounds that they've eaten. But it could be a lot of fun watching these guys going for the berries. If I was not there that day, I would have missed it because they were only there for a few hours but the important thing to remember is you've provided the food for them. Some years they'll miss it. They won't use it because of the conditions or their migratory path. But you know that it's available for them. Okay, what I'd like to do for you now is I'm going to give you examples in all of these categories, a couple examples. For dead and dying trees, I don't want to dwell on it because a lot of trees are dying out there. We have disease issues. So I'm just going to give one example. You want to leave some dead debris on the ground, and if you can leave some dead and dying trees, as long as they're safe and they're not going to cause anybody danger, you should leave some. But this is an example of a gray birch. I planted it. It was barely the size of my pinky when I planted it, and I like that it's white. It doesn't peel like a paper birch, but it's related. They eat the catkins. One day I'm driving out, so ice storm came and broke the top off. An ice storm came, broke the top off. Instead of cutting it down at the bottom, I left this, 5-foot stub. And then, to my surprise, one spring, there's chickadee made a nest, and I was driving out of my driveway. Now I rolled my window down and I videotaped it right there. And me and my wife enjoyed watching these raise their young. That's like a 3.5-inch snag there, diameter. So they could be important for habitat, even on a small scale. If you have a big snag near your house, you obviously want to make it safe. But if you have the right locations, it's good to have some woody debris. Now, early summer, shad bush is a good one. Here's a red cedar feeding its young. This is June. It's the end of June. This plant will provide berries during the summer. Red mulberry is another good one. Red mulberry provides summer food. To my amazement, this is a food habits literature. You can see that robins and as well as wood thrushes that need bigger spaces can utilize the red mulberry. To my amazement, I observed box turtles coming in and eating the berries on the ground. So not only are birds that can fly in utilizing the red mulberry, but turtles that walk on the ground that have to avoid being run over by vehicles also benefit from red mulberry. Another summer food is the black huckleberry and the highbush blueberry. Another one that's very valuable. These are the red color that the highbush blueberry becomes in the fall. Here's one in the front of my yard next to my flagpole. Here's one that I photographed out east. Just our native plants. Just imagine if people planted highbush blueberry for the ecological value, not just to make blueberries, available for their own use. Imagine if they used them for the purpose of ecological habitat. The flowers that they produce are good for pollinators, and the berries are sought after. And you have to put netting on blueberry bushes. That's how valuable they are, or wanted by wildlife. So, but think about planting them as a landscape plant, not just as a garden plant. And then you will see there's an incredible ecological and aesthetic value to our highbush blueberry. This is a real old one in an old farm out east. Fall is a time when like catbirds are fattening up, and all the birds that are leaving Connecticut or staying here for the winter. The dogwoods are very important. This is a flowering dogwood. Here's a list from the habitat literature, from the food habits literature that I'm sharing with you. All the different birds that depend on the dogwoods for food in the fall. Even the scarlet tanagers use them as they're migrating out of Connecticut. The flowers in the spring are really beautiful, and people have stopped planting the flowering dogwood. They think because of anthracnose, it's a disease, and they're planting more of the Kuza dogwood instead. The Kuza dogwood is a non-native, but it's not invasive, fortunately. It's one of the 1,000 non-invasives. It's not on the invasives list, but the Kuza dogwood doesn't provide this pollinator habitat the early spring flowering. And the flowering dogwood has also a pink variety that's natural and native as well. This is along one of the highways locally here that I drive by in the fall. That's just beautiful, and it's a pioneer, so it only lives about 25 years. So if you have a flowering dogwood that's older than 25 years, it's time to replace it with a new flowering dogwood, because you can get them up 40, 50 years old, but they're artificially old. They're old. They're really in the wild. They only live about 25 years. They're pioneer species. Here's a gray dogwood that clones, has white berries, produces these clones, really good thickets. I just want to point out that this is the same picture I showed you earlier, but the wood thrush nests in 30 or bigger acres, right? The robin loves suburbia. These two are cousins. They're in the thrush family. During the nesting season, the robin comes into our backyards and has a great time. They adapt very well to disturbed areas, small scale lawns and trees and shrubs, suburbia, disturbed habitat. Whereas the wood thrush really needs that core 30-acre saw timber sized forest. But during migration, they migrate together and they actually forage in these smaller lots as well as the bigger lots. So keep that in mind, that even if you don't have a big lot, you diversify. The wood thrushes will still visit your property and feed on the resources during the fall, and then during the spring when they're coming back during migration. Here's another example. Bayberry is a good food for the yellow-rumped warbler during the fall. Another one is Spicebush that provides the larval food for the Spicebush butterfly. It's a good fall migration food. This is the egg. Here are the two young. These are twin stars. One looks like a bird dropping with a vestigial tongue. The other one looks like a snake, fake vestigial eyes. And they hide in the leaf during the day, and then at night they forage on the spicebush. really neat native plant. All right. Now we're getting to grasses and wildflowers I'd like to share with you. At Sessions Woods, wherever there's an opening, we replaced it with native grasses. And I challenge you to learn as much as you can about native grasses. Why? Native grasses, these warm season, we call them bunch grasses, they provide a very unique habitat. These are the original ones that were here pre-colonial settlement. You're going to ask yourself, well, what good is a little blue stem? Well, here are the turkeys stripping the little seeds from it. You see them stripping and filling their crop. There's a little fluffy seed. These are what we call bunch grasses. You can see there's spaces in between. Here's big blue stem. And then deer tongue grass is one of my favorite. It gets variegated in the fall when it turns this yellow, green, brown. One year I videotaped this junco. This is a really drought out one. This is late winter. Watch this junco. It's going to go up the stalk of this deer tongue grass. It's going to eat the little seeds at the tip. Watch. Look at that. When you break open this tip, that's how the deer tongue, they hide their seeds in this little leaf margin here. The birds know to go in there to pick off those seeds. They're very nutritious. When you go into a field, birds fly out. They're there for a reason. They're eating a variety of these winter persistent seeds. Plant native grasses. They're not only beneficial, but they're beautiful. There's copper bronze color here. It's really beautiful, in my opinion. And you could plant greenery, right? We plant about humans here in North America. We make about 382,000 acres of lawn every year. Typical homeowner spends about 150 hours annually to mow and take care of their lawn. So just imagine that scale at which people enjoy changing the land. Now, don't tell people that I don't like lawns, because I do like lawns. Lawns are appropriate. But the question is how much? And are we willing to reduce or change how much can we reduce it by 5%, 10%? It's our choice as humans, right? So do we want to keep this trajectory going, or do we want to change some of that to pollinator habitat? That's the big question. And I know DOT is changing some of their land to pollinator habitat by changing their mowing, and I've helped plant some areas with them. But keep that in mind that we're changing a lot of land to lawn. Make some fields and meadows. A goldfinch doesn't just eat thistle out of a feeder. Goldfinches are looking for seeds. And here's the evening primrose, and look at all the seeds in there. One day I was walking, leading a hike, and here's a goldfinch eating the primrose seeds. They all winter long, they're foraging on these. That's just one bird doing that. There's other field sparrows, and there's even the indigo buntings. They love, other animals like to feed on. Here's a goldfinch eating on Timothy. Here's a female, there's a male. This is on our land in Sprague. My wife, I and kids have created a wildflower meadow there. And Timothy is one of the 1,000 non-native, non-invasive. So it's not invasive, so I do allow it to grow there. But these goldfinches will be eating on the primrose, they'll be eating on all the seed producers. And of course, this photo is evidence that you can have Mexico here in Connecticut. Here's a late summer, early fall picture I took at Hammonasset State Park. My wife and I were on the beach. We got chilly. It was late September. We were going back to the vehicle, and I saw hundreds of monarchs flying by. I couldn't believe my eyes. And they were landing in the conifers because of stiff winds coming off the ocean. But there were hundreds. and I took some photos. I was amazed. These monarchs depend on not Buddleia. They don't depend on Buddleia. Buddleia is like stopping at a 7-Eleven and getting a big gulp. You're just going to eat sugar. What we need is milkweed. We need the native milkweed to provide the proper foods and nectar and larval egg laying plants for these beautiful monarchs. Things like the orange butterfly weed, milkweed. I was going to share a story about this, but I'm going to have to skip it due to time. But you know, tuberosa is very important. There are about 13 on that plant there, 13 caterpillars, and then there's incarnata, red swamp weed as well, milkweed, Scapius incarnata. And then, of course, leaving the goldenrods are important. Why? Because the goldenrods are the nectar source during migration. During migration, it's the #1 nectar source. There are dozens of varieties, and I encourage you to leave some on your land. There's early ones, early bloomers, mid and late bloomers. This is a little risque slide. I'm going to cover it over, but I took this photo on our land, 5-acre meadow we created in Spring, Connecticut, and my kids helped me catalog butterflies one day, and one of them goes, "Dad, this one's distorted. Something's wrong with it." So we run over there, and sure enough, they were mating. And what was really neat was the kids had helped me plant, and my wife helped me plant the milkweed seeds, and now we have breeding pairs there, and they're laying eggs and thriving. You can make a difference. It's rewarding to see the results. This is a really neat plant, clethra. If you want to have something that is very fragrant, attracts butterflies, pollinators, it's a shrub. This one is it, July bloomer. It clones, so have it in the appropriate location. But you could cut the clones and give them to your friend, if you don't want it to expand too far. But it's a beautiful plant for pollinators, hummingbirds, bumblebees, butterflies. A wide variety of creatures will come to enjoy the nectar of this plant. And of course, the more diverse you create your land, plant a variety of wildflowers. This is our meadow in Sprague. I can't tell you, the action that we see when we diversified this patch of invaded land. There was a ton of invasives there, and now we have a diverse herbaceous wildflower, native wildflower, native grassland meadow. This is some of my favorite videos of Sphinx moths. Here's the Snowberry Sphinx moth. It mimics a bumblebee, but it's a Sphinx moth. I see those all the time on the land. Very rewarding to watch. And the other one is the Hummingbird Sphinx moth. I also see them less frequently than the other one, but amazing to watch and to enjoy on the land. Diversity is everything. New England asters, adding Joe Pyeweed, New York ironweed. Here is a viceroy. See the viceroy? Here's a monarch, and here's a viceroy. The viceroy has this line going through its hind wings. So that's how you can differentiate a viceroy from the it's a little bit smaller than from the monarch. Small fields. I can't emphasize more the importance of improving and creating small fields and meadows. You'll be amazed at the diversity of these places. From a 10 by 10 square patch, to a quarter acre, half acre lots. It's amazing what diversity you can create. Turtles thoroughly love small fields the pollinator habitats. Why? Because they're safe from being run over by things, and they can find fruits, berries. This is a dewberry, this flowering dewberry on the ground. This eastern box turtle can sun itself there, can lay eggs there, can find all kinds of things to forage on and survive. And they don't have to get run over by lawnmowers and vehicles. Anytime you could add hummingbird nectar plants like jewelweed and the cardinal flower. This is one of my favorite vines, trumpet honeysuckle. Lonicera sempervirens, always alive. I encourage you to plant one on a trellis or put one on that it can grow up on a fence or on a structure. Very valuable. Wild columbine is an early bloomer. Another good hummingbird food. These patches are also good for turkeys to bring their poults. Now, poults need lots of protein and they're early in their life, and they love to come into fields and pick off the bugs and gorge themselves on the bugs and provide a service to us. But they can thrive in these fields. They love to come out and forage in these fields. So encourage diversity in these fields. We at Deep, my program in Habitat, we help land trusts and landowners, and also on our state lands, we create patches of warm season grasses. This is our planter. It was donated to us by the Wild Turkey Federation, the chapter, Connecticut chapter, the Wild Turkey Federation. It plants these fluffy seeds, and it also plants the wildflower seeds. It's got 3 hoppers. It's got a hopper for the wildflower seeds, a hopper for the fluffy seed that needs to be properly planted through an agitator that will plant it. It's a no-till seeder. And then there's another hopper for a cover crop. But we use these to plant these native habitats. This is a great tool. All right, invasives. I'm going to give you some examples of invasives. Invasives were brought in and spread around during and after planting them. They're invasive. There are 97 of them identified in Connecticut. They degrade the habitat. This is a busy slide, but I just want to point out that this is abundance and then time. If you knock out an invasive when you first start seeing it, you'll prevent it from getting exponentially growing. So most of the time people start addressing it when there's a lot of them, big abundance of them. But try to get them when they're early. The earlier you get them, the less likely you're gonna have to spend a lot of time. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking of invasives. I'm going to give you examples. This is my family. I use my personal examples as well as my work examples. My dog Tesla, that's Anthony, my wife Joanne. Neil, my son, passed away in 2020. Very sad about that. And all of us have been managing our habitats and work together on our land. And we miss him a lot. But I'm going to share with you a couple examples, like Oriental Bittersweet. Here's our land, and it borders the Chautauqua River. And here's down here is where a lot of the bittersweet was. And I'm going to share with you an example. This is a plant that you definitely can manage and have a big effect on your land. So I'm going to use it as an example. It has a prolific amount of seeds. It creates these vines that weigh down trees. How do you manage them? They distort trees. Here's what we do. We cut them. And here you can see the size. It's a pretty big one. But every time we cut them, we make sure that we cover the cut surface with triclopyr. Triclopyr is called brush begone. It prevents this from happening, prevents the stump sprouting. So if you're, if you spread it on the, on the stump, it will prevent, it'll get absorbed into the roots and prevent that from resprouting. A lot of people are squeamish about using herbicides, but this particular herbicide prevents the resprout. These are managed trees that we cut the vines on. You see all the bittersweet dying. We've had up to 80% of the canopy cover full of, and these, after you cut them and treat them, you could see that the trees rebound and they no longer have this weight on them and cause them to fall over and break. So you have an amazing effect. So little by little, we started managing them, and we've gotten rid of over 8 acres worth of it. And wherever we find it, we cut and paint stems. And I do this on state land as well, strategically, but I wanted to share with you a personal example that we have been managing since 2004 on our land. And it's very effective. And you prevent trees from being ripped down and suffocated. The other one is autumn olive. Autumn olive is a real nasty perennial plant, shrub, grows 60 pounds of fruit. I just want to point out that deep wildlife biologists in the early days, in the 50s and 60s, were also guilty of promoting them, and DOT planted them on the highways, and soil conservationists used them for soil projects. Nobody knew at the time they were invasive. 1991, the state nursery stopped growing them because they learned that it's invasive. And a memorandum between DEP and DOT is that we won't plant them in any of our, no invasives can be planted in any money that is used for projects. So how do we remove them? We mechanically remove them by ripping them out with a chain, and we can effectively knock them out. We collect seeds from native plants and grow them and plant them in the place of them. If you have any doubt if invaded sites are bad or good, this study from Delaware proved that the invaded sites have less caterpillars and less biomass. And the benefits of the native plants are, you can see, have better fat content. Okay. Spring food, summer food, grasses, fall foods, winter persistent foods are all important. And I'm going to share with you quickly winter foods. Anytime you could add things like staghorn sumac or smooth sumac, it's valuable. These are not poison sumac. These are berries that are not poisonous. They're the red ones. The white berry sumac is the poison sumac. Holly, winter holly. If you could plant winter holly, it's deer resistant. It provides food. The female plant produces the berries. Winter holly, Ilex opaca. Our native roses are valuable. They produce these beautiful hips that wildlife use. Consider planting those on the edges of your fields. This is just a food habits. I cut open a crop of a roadkill turkey. They store their food in a crop, and don't get too grossed out, but this is where they store their food. And here's the food that was found in the crop of this turkey. And I just want to share with you what was in it. Acorns, there were red, these were black cherry seeds. And to my amazement, over here, all this bunch here, all this was skunk cabbage blossoms. It's amazing the food habits of a turkey in the early spring. This was March of 2008. They were eating the blossoms of the skunk cabbage, which are the first blooming plants coming up out of the swamps. And of course, there was also some insects. But our wild turkeys need food from the spring through the winter to forage on, to survive. So where do you start? Locate your property in the map of what you can manage, of what you're managing. measure the area, take soil samples, decide on what you want to plant, larval foods. Do you want to plant with seeds, plugs? Do you want to knock out the existing grass? Do you use organic or chemical methods? These are all decisions you have to make. And you create a timeline to improve it. I have a booklet called Enhancing Your Backyard Habitat for Wildlife that you could download on the web if you want some more information about a little guide on how to do habitat management on a small scale. But you make a little map and you want to inventory it, okay? And this is very basic. And then plot out where your invasives are. You need to put where your invasives are because you have to manage them eventually because they're little cancers on the landscape. And then make a little, after you create this little map of the property, it could be a small scale, an acre at a time, or it could be bigger scale, and start managing the habitat. So an inventory first, then start managing. Always select a plant for its habitat significance. Is it a spring, summer, fall, winter food? Is it a cover plant? Is it a larval plant? Does it have seasonal food and cover value? Does it like wet or dry or conditions or sun or shade? And is it a non-native? You want to make sure that you pick the natives. I want to share with you your own town as to end my slides, because I want to congratulate the Land Trust for keeping your town with some open space. But this is a 30 years of change in your town. And I did some homework for you. If you imagine in 1985, there were 16,685 acres of forest. Now there's 16,230 acres, which is, you've lost about 455 acres of forest. You've lost about 19 acres of ag field. But look at your turf grass. You've added 194 acres of turf grass. In 85, you had 203. Now there's 297. Developed areas, you've added 129 acres. Now, this is reality. It's done by aerial photo interpretation. If you go to Yukon ClearSight, you can plug this in and you get the data, but it shows over 30 years how a place has changed. You could do this for every town in Connecticut. Just gives you an overview of what is going on. It's a good way to plan, think about your town, but you can make a difference in your town by observing nature, enjoying nature. You can learn to predict the seasonal plant and animal interactions. This is just a simple observation. I looked at these growing plants and I looked at close up and turned out they were the seeds of the silver maple recolonizing a habitat. Observe and you'll see that nature wants to put things where they want to be. Inventory the area you're going to manage. Make a simple plan. You might have to hire somebody to inventory, or you get you get folks that understand and identify plants. Then make a simple plan. Diversify your plantings. Don't plant monocultures. Increase native plants on your property. Don't plant invasives. Prioritize which invasives, like go after the bittersweet, the autumn olive, and some of the easier target plants. Make locations, notes of where they're found so that you can later strategize to manage them. Two things to avoid in this thing called wildlife management enhancement. It's a thing called paralysis by analysis. I just want to leave you with this thought. It's not that hard. You can do it one plant at a time. Start with a square foot of land, 10 square feet, 100 square feet. Start one plant at a time. Don't overanalyze. Start chipping away at knocking out invasives and planting natives. And then there's this thing called extinction by instinct. You have a truck from your neighbors. Your neighbor borrows. You borrow your neighbor's truck. You just go to a nursery with a sale and you buy anything they have on sale without consulting the 97 list of invasives. That's called extinction by instinct. So avoid these two pitfalls and then create a better habitat for wildlife. All right, you still there?
Hello.
Hi, I'm running low on battery, so I hope I'm still gonna be here for questions,
Uh-oh.
but go
Okay.
ahead.
All right. There are some questions, which is awesome. And some people threw some links up for, there's a good resource for an invasive plant list through UConn's invasive plant working group.
Yes,
And also there's a link for a native plant and pollinator conference that UConn is doing tomorrow by Zoom.
yes,
And
I was gonna mention that, yep.
there's also a bunch of thank yous from everybody, Rochelle and Jay Perry and Wendy and Holly. I'll say thank you. And also there were some questions. Somebody wanted to know if Phragmites has any positive value.
So, not a lot of people know this, but there's a native Phragmites in Connecticut. There's actually a native variety. It's up in the Twin Lakes area up in the northwest corner. There's some along the shore. You would never know it. You have to learn the difference. It's a little more diminutive, but the invasive one that's here, unfortunately, other than cover value, they do provide some cover value. They have destroyed a lot of our coastal habitats, unfortunately, and in inland marshes, they really spread rapidly as well. So there, unfortunately, cumulatively, there's no redeeming characteristics. But the native frag, that if you ever, you could look it up and there's different, you could figure it out, but they're not, the native frag isn't as aggressive.
The trico, is it
Triclopyr,
trichopyr? Is
yep.
that good for dealing with black locust? Somebody wanted to know.
Yes, so yeah, you could do a foliar spray with triclopyr on locust, or you could also paint it on the stems. Yes.
And then curious to know if you think or know that Eversource is doing anything with replanting of native plants while they're clearing away the invasives or all the other plants on the highway. You know how they're doing all that clearing on the highway? Do they have plans to put natives back? I don't know if you know.
Highway, or are you talking about the power lines?
The question
Okay.
is the state doing anything to plant natives back along the highways that
Oh, yes, the highways, yeah. So years ago, about 4 years ago now, we planted 4 sites with DOT. We used our planter, our equipment. We collaborated on the plant lists and plant seed sources and stuff. And we planted 4 example areas. And so they were trial areas, and they now, since they've also done minimal mowing areas, but yes, they are planting as well. DOT is doing some supplemental planting, and they are definitely, I'll tell you, I work annually, during the year, I do work with the DOT landscape designers and folks that are managing the highways. And there's a lot of enthusiasm in restoring native pollinator habitats within the rank and file, within the folks working there. It's amazing. It's really exciting to see their positive, and it's a new thing, it's a challenge, but they are making headway, and they are collaborating with us, and we are sharing our equipment, and we're sharing our knowledge of managing herbaceous environments, within wildflowers and habitat, native
That's
grasses.
excellent. That's very reassuring. That's a lot
Yeah.
of space there that's available.
Oh, yeah, they own a lot of land, and they manage a lot of land, and they're trying to balance that with their traffic needs and their traffic management needs, but they are making a difference. And they are, I know, at least 4 sites, and then 4 other areas that were minimally mowed, and now they've expanded that. And you can, they occasionally do presentations they did a presentation with Connecticut Invasive Plant Working Group Symposia. They go out, the landscape designers have been sharing that information with the public now.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Another person wanted to know if you have any favorite native ground covers.
So when you say favorite, it depends on the situation. If you want a woody plant that can spread and then cover a hillside, sweet fern, Camptolia peregrina, it can stabilize a hillside or a steep bank. You could put dewberry in an area also. There's bearberry, native bearberry. It's produces a berry that's good for rocky areas. There are a lot of them. Even ferns. People don't don't think of ferns, but ferns are good cover, ground cover.
What about a good woodland edge, low level shrub to plant on the edge of your grass if you want to reduce the lawn area slowly?
Yeah, so depending on your goals, there's low bush blueberry, there's huckleberry, there's again, I would look at what's already growing there. Look in the understory of your forest and see what naturally grows there, and you could bring them out. So a lot of times there's huckleberry there, or there's blueberry, low bush or high bush. You got to really look at what is already there in the natural environment, and then bring them out. The sweet pepper bush can get 4 or 5 feet tall, but you could trim it. But that's one that's possible too. Creates a soft edge. Really, really low would be low bush blueberry, and huckleberry would be two of the lowest ones. Somebody just posted native ground covers there.
Oh yeah, native ground
Yeah,
cover.
yeah.
Yeah. Another question was if somebody wanted to plant wildflowers in their lawn, would you recommend removing the grass first?
Yeah, so I recommend, you have to remove the turf. The turf is inhibitory. It inhibits seed growth. So you could take a piece of plywood and drop it on the lawn in a spot, whether you can make it round or oval, and let it die out, and then you could plant it, or you could kill it with an herbicide, and then wait the appropriate time, remove the turf, and then plant. The key thing with turf is other than dandelion, there's not many things that can penetrate turf. Turf is very negative growth for other things. It wants to only grow itself. So when you got to kill what's existing and then plant your plugs or your seeds after you remove the competition.
Speaking of competition, there were a couple of questions about knotweed. Somebody wanted to know what your experience was dealing with knotweed, and then another person asked if you knew if the Department of Transportation had any plans for managing it along the highways.
So I do have a lot of experience with knotweed on state lands. We killed an acre of it up in Goshen this year. Oh boy.
Oh, we lost him. I don't know if he has his charger to plug back in, but maybe he can email us his answer. Pretty good run though, considering his battery was low the whole time. Okay, guys. I'll wait another minute here and see if he comes back to us. I'm not sure if he will or not. That was pretty funny timing. If you guys want to hang out until about 8:30, we'll see if he comes back. Yeah, I wish I could call him in. I mean, he could call. Oh, here he comes. He's coming back. He found his plug. Hopefully.
Hey, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, so I'm back on my phone. I
You're on
told
your
you
phone.
that my battery was dying out on my laptop, but I'm back on
Welcome.
my phone. You guys can see me?
Yep.
Okay, so I recovered with my phone here. Answering that knotweed question.
Yes.
Yes, I have experience with it. The challenge with knotweed is if it's an old patch, like greater than 5 years old, you have a lot of rhizome, a lot of stored energy in the roots. So I recommend you mow it regularly so that you don't let it get any more photosynthesis going. But you need to treat it. What I do is I let it, I remove all the dead canes originally when you find a new patch. It's not been managed for more than 5 years or however many years, you want to remove the dead vegetation, then mow it down. I like to use either, if it's not a big patch, you can use hand pruners, but if it's a big patch, you're gonna have to use a brush cutter. You remove the vegetation, pile it up on tar so that it heats up, so it doesn't, you don't want it germinating anywhere. So, or on black plastic, let it get heated and die, and then let it resprout. And we like to spray it when it's about a foot tall or a foot and a half tall. So we will spray it 2 or 3 times during the summer. Some people only spray it once at the end of the summer. Some habitat managers, we give it 3 applications, and we found that we are very good at knocking out the rhizomes. But you could also, you knock it out, you let it resprout from the rhizome, and usually you can get 2 resprouts at least, sometimes 3 during the course of the growing season. But at least spray it at least once at the end of the summer, or twice, midsummer and then late summer. But you have to stay on top of it. Triclopyr works. Some people use Mazapyr, which is a product that you need a license to use. Some people use glyphosate, like rodeo. It's on a wetland area. It depends on the site conditions. So, I mean, the site, yeah, if it's a wet area, you got to use appropriate, but if it's in a dry area, Triclopyr works. Brush Begone products, Triclopyr products.
Excellent. And then now that we're into the invasives management, another question about the guidance for getting rid of mugwort.
Yeah, so mugwort is another challenging herb. It can grow up to 32 or 31 feet a year. Dr. Ward at the experiment station actually measured that. But anyway, it's a clonal species. So mugwort is another invasive that you don't want it to go to seed. So make sure you mow it. Don't let it ripen its seed. The seed will spread by wind and create more problems around your field. But firstly, you want to mow it. After you mow it, let it resprout, and we do a mid-summer application on it with triclopyr-based herbicides. You spray it like the end of June, middle to end of June, and then you look at it again in August and see if it's died out or if it still has green green growth. And then we usually do another spray at the end of the summer, the end of August, early September, and we do kill it that way. I know there are people studying black plastic and mechanical methods, and there's a few people that I'm keeping in touch with that are doing it that way, and I'm going to monitor how effective they are at killing mugwort. We use strategically placed herbicides on our properties. Are just so big, too much, too much area to cover. So we haven't been doing. We do mechanical if I find 1 or 2 clumps isolated, I'll rip them out of the ground. If you have patches and patches, acres and acres, of course we revert to using chemical as well. To obviously, but I remove it whenever I see it. You definitely want to manage it. Even 1 mugwort plant is too much because it'll clone, just get huge. So that's a really challenging one.
And what's your thought on Norway maple? If you have one, do you think it should be taken down?
So Norway maples are, I have examples in my slides of it, but for time's sake, I didn't use it. But at sessions, the seeds blow in from the adjoining neighborhood, and we have them growing on the edge of our forest, and they're sort of creeping in a little. That one, if it doesn't have sentimental value, you didn't plant it for somebody's memorial or something, we remove them and use them for firewood, and we replace them with sugar maple, red maple, some of the more majestic colored, fall foliage plants. On state lands, we manage them, we knock them out, we girdle them. Sometimes we get rid of them for firewood. But we manage, when we rip out the seedlings, you could rip out the seedlings by hand, or you could cut them and paint them. When you cut the stump, make sure you paint triclopyr to don't let them stump sprout. Yeah, we remove them whenever we can. It's listed as a potentially invasive plant, but it's one that we definitely manage and knock out.
And one more question. I think this is the final question. You have a downloadable book or something that might be available as a
Yeah,
resource?
there's a guide called Enhancing Your Backyard Habitat for Wildlife. If you Google it, it's a PDF that you could download online. So you can just Google my name and Enhancing Your Backyard Habitat for Wildlife. It's a publication I published in my work at Deep, and it's a guide. It's a little guide. It's got a blueberry front cover on it, blueberries, and then on the inside, just a little how-to guide on small scale habitat enhancement.
Okay, I found it. I have the link and I'm going to put it in the chat box to everyone.
Very good. That's it.
Any other questions from the peanut gallery? There, Sue's got the name of it. There you go. Everyone says, thank you, thank you. And how to plant white clover in an existing lawn. I guess I missed that question. White clover, existing lawn?
Believe it or not, white clover is aggressively, it can invade natural areas. It's better than lawn. You don't want it in your fields if you have a natural area, because it is listed, but the red clovers are much more valuable because they cluster instead of, see, white clover kind of becomes a monoculture, like a carpet amount of clover. So of the clovers, it's probably not the one that promotes diversity, but I'd rather somebody have white clover than lawn, because it is pollinator friendly. But there's other clovers. Just keep in mind that the white clover is a little more aggressive, a lot more aggressive, and it clones. So try to use some of the other clovers. It would definitely, they're not as aggressive.
Excellent.
Other things will grow inside a red clover patch, for example. White clover tends to be a whole mat of itself.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's not native either. Yeah.
Well, I took a lot of notes. I don't know about anyone else. We did record this session, so we will have that link available at some point in the near future, both on the Land Trust page and probably on the Pollinator Pathway sites. I guess at this point we will release you back to your homes and your other businesses, to whatever you would like to do. Thank you everyone for coming and joining us this Thursday evening. Thank you to our sponsors, the Lyme Public Library, Lyme Pollinator Pathway, and the Lyme Land Trust. Thank you for so many of you coming from other towns to join us. And also thank you so much to Peter for taking your time out this evening and teaching us about native plantings. It was very informative. You had some great photos and I learned a lot and I had a good time.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Sue. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, audience. And wish you guys all the best in your habitat management. And one plant at a time, you could make a difference. I know you can.
Thank you. This is great. This is great. Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.